Hi, welcome to Writing Wednesday. This is Janet Fitch, and this is where I discuss all things writing. Writing psychological questions, philosophical questions, your questions about writing. It's all things writing. Hi, Brenda. And every Wednesday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, and times in between. Um, and if you have questions for me in between writing Wednesdays, hi Marie. If you have questions for me in between writing Wednesdays, send them to me through my website, janetfitchwrites.com, and I can design a Writing Wednesday around your question. So today's question is uh, comes from Brenda. Hi, Brenda. Good to see you. And it is, I'm starting a second novel, and you'd think I'd never written a word. I'm stunned about how to begin actually writing the pages. I have a very good sense of the main character, some of the supporting ones, and a general notion of the key points of the story. I fear procrastinating via research. The setting is early 1990s and in a university lab doing research, and I won't give your plot away here. Um, I know a little bit about uh, the setting and the subject, let's say, but fear going down rabbit holes. Yes. Once you know the story you want to tell, how do you actually begin? With page one and with whatever scene comes to you first, or do you have any system at all? Okay. So the second novel, I thought we would talk about the second novel problem is a phenomenon, and it's well-known phenomenon that you are not alone in having trepidations about the second novel. Hi, Sungju, nice to see you. Um, the second novel is like think of the second album problem, that a band will have all of their lives, often young lives, but hi Sarah, will have all of their young lives to get the first album together. And when you see these first amazing first albums, um, you have to know that that took someone or a group of people perhaps many years to write those songs. And they get the songs written, and the album maybe comes out, becomes a big hit, and then they want a second novel. The label wants a second novel, uh, like yesterday. They want a second novel in 6 months, or a second album in 6 months, year, you know. And suddenly they have a problem, and many second albums, and you can read in here second novels, suffer the consequences of being written so quickly to try to satisfy the needs of a sudden audience. Oh, somebody actually liked my album. Now I have to get it done. The second one. Now, for me, I had a huge problem with that second novel. And it's a different kind of a problem than getting the first novel. The first novel, people are like, they don't even really believe you're a writer yet. They ask you embarrassing questions that you don't want to answer because you're already feeling bad that you haven't gotten the first one done, and you don't know if it'll ever get done. Will I ever be a published writer? All of that goes into the first novel, all that uncertainty. But you pour what you know, everything you are, everything you know, into that first novel, and then Now you have to write a second novel. And if the first novel was a big, a big to do, and I know that some of you people watching are writers with this problem. It's not a bad problem to have, and people, often will be somewhat envious of you, that you had that big first book or respectable first book, and so now what are you going to do there? Now you have expectations. When you have a first novel, nobody's expecting anything of you. They don't even expect you to finish your book, really. They just want you to, stop complaining so much. Whereas when you have a first novel that does fairly well, you they don't know. You're reminded that there are people waiting for the next book. So I don't know if this is quite Brenda, your situation, but it is a real situation that people find themselves in. And it rattles you. The more successful the first book, the more difficult the second book is, because now um, you're trying to meet expectations. You're trying to match something that maybe you didn't want to match. Um, Maybe you can't, or you get into this false sense of having to top it. And I will definitely address the specifics, Brenda, of yours, but I wanted to kind of given, various aspects of that first novel problem. Um, so you go to work on your second novel and you're trying to get it working, and then it's like you've never written anything before. And Brenda points this out absolutely specifically, that it's like you've never written anything before. Um, you'd think I'd never written a word. I'm stumped to how to begin writing pages. How do you begin with page one? So the questions that you have with the first novel recur. You think that once you've gotten written a novel, that the next one is, then you've learned, and it becomes easier. But it's the nature of art that you're never there. There's no there. There's uh, your skills have improved, but your expectations of yourself uh, have also grown. So so you really know you're never, you're further along than you were with the first novel. You've learned things, but the lessons you've learned with the first novel generally don't apply to the next book. And that is something that's intrinsic to fiction writing. What you learn on one book is not applicable for the next book. You're always a beginner. You're always starting over. And it's not only that you're building something new, but it's almost like you have to build the tools for that book all over again. You can't use the same hammer, you can't use the same saw, you can't use the same screwdrivers. You have to create new tools. So every book is really starting over, and you make the same decisions that you had to make before, you're making again. Brenda says, wish I was a big success. That was my problem. I wish that was my problem. LOL. But the time pressure is definitely an issue. The agent wants it now. Yeah, there's more pressure, if you can imagine it in a way. There is more pressure on the second book than there is on the first book. And you probably have emptied out your bag of tricks already on the first book. You've already done it. That's your first album. And you've already emptied your bag of tricks. And now what? So this is where you have to have confidence in not in the tools that you built on the first book, but on your ability to make tools. You have to have develop and hang on to your confidence that you have already completed. Like say if you can use the analogy of a house, you have already built a house and you're going to be building something very different with different tools, but you've already done it once. And the pressure to for the second book, can be a pressure to replicate what you just did. And that becomes burdensome in the sense that the freshness of your experience as a writer is usually not about replicating anything. So you are going to want to rebuild your tools. You are going to want to have some kind of, have that for yourself because you're an artist. It has to be a feeding of yourself as an artist as well as creating an object. So what is it that's going to be interesting to you about the second book? The pressure from others, either an expectant audience or your agent, in this case, Brenda's agent, hi Amy, is to produce something quickly. This is the second album problem that musicians experience. How fast can you get the second album out to capitalize on the success of the first one? Or to, an agent wants to sell something, they don't get paid for it sitting around, they get paid for selling stuff. And if they have nothing to sell, at least from you, I mean, maybe definitely other authors, but their purpose is to sell. So of course they want to have something to sell, you know. A good agent will remember that cultivating the artist in the long run is in their best interest. And a really good book is in their best interest, not a hastily assembled product like a hamburger that they can get out there and sell. A good agent recognizes that the quality of the product is a feature of the process and of enriching the artist. So you have to be enriching yourself in the process of creating the second book. So let me tell you about the second book problem that I occurred. It's not going to be the same for everybody, but second novel, I had done a novel that was basically a three-person novel set locally. But I thought that the second novel should be, a topper. You should top what you did before. And I made a colossal mess, just a filthy, colossal mess. I forgot how to write. I forgot that I knew how to do this. I forgot, I overestimated the reach. I selected too big a topic. Anybody ever write a thesis? Like they tell you to cut it down, cut it down, cut it down until it's a manageable size because you're going to go into it. The second novel, I think, should try not to top yourself. Try to interest yourself. Try to do something that you think you can do so that you can have a timely delivery of your book, but something you think you can do, but not replicating what you've already done, because you'll tend to lose interest. It becomes mechanical, kind of hackneyed, the bad second album that we've all seen. It's just like, oh, we had such hopes for that person. And then the second album is like, snore, because it was just, hastily assembled. Um, I'd say, so the first question is where do I start? Um, how do I begin writing pages? I fear procrastinating via research. So we've talked about that a little bit. You don't want to research first and then write. You want to have an idea of what you're writing and then just do the research to support what you're writing. So I do them in tandem. So there's no procrastination with research. I write something and then I do the research to support what I'm writing. And it keeps you away from the rabbit hole. It's not, you're not looking at anything and everything that might go into the book. That way lies disaster. So say this is written in the 1990s and it has to do with AI. Um, so you want to have somewhat of a foundation before you start. You have to know basically where your what your subject is and basically what was going on at the time. And then as your character is making some breakthrough, or some realization or some conflict is going on in the story, in the chapter, then you research what you need for that chapter. What is the what are you missing? Because any kind of historical, you have to watch out. There's a million interesting things around any subject at any particular time, any particular problem, and you cannot include them all in your book. And if you try, you end up distorting the story that you wanted to tell. So so write and research at the same time once you have a basic framework for the whole book. Um, then uh, how do you begin? Now, I begin with generally, I begin with a character and a situation that puts pressure on that character. So, if you have a character who is, say, um, uh, cantankerous, I mean, I don't want to like make this too stereotypical, but you cantankerous old man, and then you put some pressure on that cantankerousness where something gets under their skin, something appeals to them. So there's a possibility of a different way of living. So you put pressure on that characteristic and then you can see what happens. It's like winding a spring. So if I have, say, a character who has ideas about love, and then they fall in love, I have them fall in love with somebody who is unsuitable. And then they can dump them. And then let's see what happens to that character. Um, so I take a situation that's that's volatile, that has it's got to go somewhere. There's gonna, the characters simply cannot stay the same. You put them in that situation, and then you see where they go. That's usually where I start. But you can start anywhere. The book that became my second novel, because the first second novel failed so desperately. I mean, it failed. That's a book that came from what I call, there's a neck up story and then there's a neck down story. The neck up story is where you have an idea and you write from an idea, very up here, very neck up, you know. Um, what if there's a character who does this and then this happens? And, that'd be high concept. There's the neck down story where it comes up from who you are, that you feel a strong connection internally with the character. And so the problem that they face is a problem that you face. It's putting pressure on your own psychology, your own characteristics. Um, so I made the mistake in the second book, after White Oleander, of writing from the neck up. I wanted to write a story set in the 20s with, kind of these kind of characters, and it just, I could never get a hold of it because I really wasn't in it. Um, and then I cut it back to, I found a situation short story, that was about something that I really felt. It was the aftermath of a suicide, and uh, the suicide's girlfriend comes to see where the boyfriend had killed himself, and his mother is on is sedated on the couch and just doesn't fight it. You want to see where he killed himself. Have at it. And then the interaction is between these two characters. It was very small, and it was such a relief after the big book I had tried to write. It was huge and way beyond what I could do. I pulled it back. It was three characters, and one of them was dead. So I started with what really is the climax of the book, and then asked myself, who is this character? Who is this character? Who is this character? And then moving back and forth, as from that climactic scene, and that scene was never really in the book. Turns out, maybe to some degree. And then I built it out that way, so you can start with the part of the book that seems most charged to you. Write a short story, or think of that sequence that's a short story. It might be the climax of the book. It might have been, you know when this whoever your characters are, maybe they are developing an AI thing, and you're envisioning it going horribly wrong, and then you might want to just start with what that place where it goes horribly wrong, and then getting better feel for the characters, getting a better feel for the conflict, and then, okay, how would you set this up? Like, who is your protagonist? And you can you can work backwards, and where did they come from? How did that conflict start? Did they know each other in college? Were they rivals at MIT? You know, um, and set that up. And then if you needed to do research about MIT in the 80s and the, machine language or whatever, then do enough to write that scene. You can always do more. Um, and then I always say, anytime we had a writing Wednesday about this. Uh, Anytime you see any scene that you can see clearly, you can write it and put it in a box. And then any other scene you see clearly, you can write it and put it in a box. And then when the box is full, you can take it out, 3-hole punch, and then take a binder and try to get some flow to it and see where things fit. And then you can see where you still have to write things. You do not have to write things chronologically. Um, when you write things chronologically, often you write what people in the theater world call the obligatory scene. You're writing scenes that structurally need to be there, but you're not necessarily connecting to it. It's not really grabbing you artistically. Um, Often you don't need the obligatory scene. Sometimes you have to. But then by then you'll have enough bulk in that book that you'll know what the characters will be doing in that big scene, because there's also avoiding the big scene, which I had to learn as well. So yeah, you do not have to start on page one, because page one will be thrown out eventually. You will not keep page one. You will not keep probably the first, whatever your opening is, you might not keep any of it, because when you get to the end, then you'll know what you needed to begin. You'll know so much more about your story by the time you get to the end, that often the opener doesn't even work anymore, or it's just, you know, it's suggesting a story that ends up not being the story that you wrote. Um, so Sarah says, how far did you get with the failed second book before rerouting? I got probably 900 pages. I took 2 runs at it, and with a different protagonist, and just ran aground, could not do it, and had to box it up and get rid of it and start again with a short story I'd written that just seemed to want to be longer. It was a little gothic story, with basically there were 2 characters, and it's like, and so there's a 3-person story, and basically I knew I could do that, or I felt like I could do that. I just started very slowly opening that up, and where do you start with a story like that, and discovering the characters, and then after a few weeks, it was moving, and I was like, oh, I know how. Guess what? I still sort of do know how to write, because that experience almost killed me as a writer. I just didn't feel like I could write anymore. Whereas, in fact, I just took too big a bite, and was like choking on it. So Sarah asks, did pulling back for book 2 help you expand to write sprawling books 4 and 5? Um, the um, yeah, having backed away from the big historical novel for 2, writing the small 3-person book that became Painted Black next, did help me kind of rearrange myself, learn what I shouldn't do. Um, and then I tried an historical for what the book that became The Revolution of Marina M. had its start in that failed book. There was a character in there that I really liked, and she was a survivor of the Russian Revolution working as a maid in a hotel. And I really liked her, and I tried to write from her point of view, write her story. But I realized I didn't know her well enough to write her story in 1922 in America. I needed her to go back into the revolution and find out what actually happened, that I had to live through that with her. So the failed book actually did become The Revolution of Marina M. and Chimes of the Lost Cathedral. So I was better able to do it. Although I, at day, like year 8 on that book, um, I really panicked. I really felt like I was going to do this for the rest of my life. I was recapitulating my experience with the failed book. It's really scared me. Um, and but I had the actual history to cling to, so I had a little bit more confidence that I could finish it, and the fact that I was able to get that second book out gave me the confidence. Um, so Sun Ju says, I am writing my second novel, so this is absolutely on topic for you. I am writing my second novel, so many things you've said is exactly what I'm dealing with. Uh, Thanks, I feel less in the dark as I'm listening to you. Yeah, feel free to ask questions right now. Anything you might have going on with the second book. Keep it keep it doable. Don't overreach on the second book, because you will, um, if you are really, if you overreach, you could be making a big puddle for yourself, especially if you're going, oh, the first one I've all, was small. Now I want to, kick out the jams. It's like, think about it. Oh, Llewellyn says, is failure only personal? That's interesting. Is failure only personal? I mean, as opposed to societal? Or, I do think, the pressures on people and on their lives, are not just personal. If I was, say, taking care of three kids and trying to get my second novel out, um, I would say some of the difficulty I might have is not personal. It's societal. That I'm not getting any support from the world. Um, in other countries, artists are supported. You know, there was a big controversy about that when I was younger, and now here we are again, even worse. Should a country support its artists? In Europe, they say yes. The Europeans do support their artists. In America, we are so, you know, we are a capitalistic country, and we tend to judge everything through monetary, on a monetary basis. There's no intrinsic um, respect for the arts or the human soul or um, culture in general. It, Capitalism doesn't care about any of that. Capitalism is just a big engine. Um, and it's society is more than that engine. Culture is more than that engine. Ideally, that engine supports something. It doesn't exist for itself. It exists to support a culture, to support a society and the values of the society. And then the engine provides the material wherewithal to do that. And I think in America, we have lost the thread, and then the engine becomes the thing itself. The engine is worshiped as a good in itself rather than seeing it as the engine of a culture. And so cultural products are not supported, they're not respected. People don't even understand so much the point of culture. It's not entertainment. It's saying something about values, it's saying something about the human experience, the shared experience, the greater experience of a society, what we really value, who we really are. It explores questions that that machine just doesn't even think about or care about, and nor should it. Um, but the society goes astray when it worships the engine instead of what the engine is able to support. Commercial um, uh, is commercial failure. Well, we can talk about commercial failure or success. I think we do best if we remember that capitalism is an engine that supports culture, and that the respect for the culture, especially among artists, is absolutely essential. You know, if you think of art, and this may or may not apply to you guys, but it does generally apply to artists, that what we do is a calling. We are called to express ourselves and what we feel and how we see the world in a way that puts other people in touch with their own deeper thoughts, their own maybe um, uh, not yet articulated thoughts and feelings and sensitivity to life and appreciation of life and its difficulties, um, and our success is how much of ourselves have we been able to put in, and how have we been able to bridge the uh, it's almost like a synapse, how to bridge the gap between ourselves and another person, which is what art does. To my mind, that's success. Financial success um, enables you to continue to do it. Uh, Unfortunately, in our world, success is, people see a successful writer as somebody who can support themselves. Oh, they make money, they must be a real writer, not realizing that there are so many incredibly important writers who don't support themselves from their work, from their writing. They support themselves in other ways. Certainly poets, fiction writers, real artists do all kinds of things. Um, I mean, you might wash cars. I mean, serve drinks. Um, that it's where you put your heart. It's where you put your, um, kind of what's your lodestar. I mean, to make art is a calling. And if you're not really called to it, I remember having a group of spirits. Yeah, they were spirits too. A group of students. Um, just this one year, I was teaching at SC, and there was one year that I'd say about a third of them, but a really vocal third of them, um, they all wanted to be bestsellers. They all wanted to make a lot of money. And I'm talking about art, and they're talking about commerce. And we really, I mean, it was like, doing 16 rounds with Mike Tyson. How am I going to make a lot of money doing this? It's just like, dude, if you want to make a lot of money, why are you in the arts? If you want to make a lot of money, go into banking. That's where the money is in banking, is on Wall Street. If you want money, work with money, or go into law and work with money. So the commercial expectation of artists is it's to misunderstand the engine, that capitalistic engine. So here's a question. This is not necessarily a second novel problem, but what do you think of the rise of AI will make artistic work more valuable? No, I think that the rise of AI will devalue everything. It's like the condition of the media, where it used to be mainstream media was the gold standard because they could be sued, their stuff was vetted, they had professional editors who both pushed and challenged the writers. Where'd you get this? Where's your source? And that the more journalism became infotainment, the less pressure on the journalist and on the newspapers and state TV news and all the different aspects of journalism, it started to corrode the quality. And what we're seeing now looks like a junior high newspaper. I mean, the amount of avoidance of the hard questions and the questionable sources and the drawing up of serious journalism in the newspapers and in mass venues has not improved journalism. And AI cheapens everything it touches. People are, I mean, to use AI in fiction writing is copying. It's it's not writing. It's not creating. When we create out of ourselves and what we know and our unique fingerprints. When we're starting to use AI, it not only it just is borrowing instead of creating. So it hurts the endeavor of creation of culture, but it also creates an audience who doesn't know the difference. It creates an audience willing to accept that as art. So they might not recognize real art when they see it. My husband is a comedy writer, and he says that the end of, or the beginning of the end was the laugh track, because once they it's like it blurred the ability to understand something that was really funny versus something that was kind of artificially boosted. And he thought it was a devaluation of the coin of the realm. A true laugh that is not signaled by a laugh track or audience participation. Um, a true laugh is the coin of the realm, and real art is degraded by work that has used this stuff. So it trains an audience to accept it, and you know, it's it. I think it devalues. It shouldn't, but I think it's going to. Um, that's sad, but that's so. um, So Sung Ju says, it's one thing we have to do as fiction writers is imagine, and AI cannot imagine. No, but AI can steal. That's what it does, is it imitates. So as readers, we have to reject what has been stolen and what has been homogenized and what has been, you know, um, not created by that unique fingerprint. Um, So Sarah says calling. When I talk about writing as a calling, I'm realizing is a very passive way to refer to it. I prefer pursuit. Yeah, pursuit is really good. I mean a calling in the religious sense. Do you have that kind of reverence for the act of creating art? Um, So, well, I'm feeling quite a bit of my own prejudice here. So Brenda says, I work in IT media, and the term I keep hearing is AI stop. When publications publish AI generated material to save paying freelancers. AI slop. Yeah. Well, and they get everything wrong too, which is, I think there's going to be a nice, um, a nice backlash that's happening now, really. AI is doing all kinds of stuff that people are going, oh, wait a second, this is, it's wrong, I mean, factually wrong, the things they're producing, and it's screwing people up. So maybe there will be a backlash, hopefully. IT media, wow. And Sung Ju says, but AI cannot think, never mind imagine. So how can they actually write fiction? They imitate, they aggregate. It takes, a bit of Faulkner and a bit of Hemingway, and it sees a basic patterns. It can, get the basic plots and patterns from thousands of books, and kind of gel it, you know, boil it down to some basic plots, and then it uses the styles that it has been fed from stealing from all these writers and phrases and word choice, and then it creates something that's kind of bland, but it's people have lost the demand, they've lost how demanding they should be. And I don't mean people, I mean readers. So we as writers should astonish people so that want to see astonishing things and not just, run of the mill garbage. I mean, run of the mill um, product. Brenda says, off topic, it's cool. But I wrote about your weekend intensive during COVID on writing from the senses. Please ask me if you ever do that, something like that again. Yeah, I'll probably be writing from the senses, maybe in the fall. I'll do another intensive on that, because that's something that an AI doesn't have senses, and people crave the senses, especially the more they work on screens, the more they are in a mediated world. Direct encounter with the senses is something they crave in their reading and in their lives. And that's something we can give them for sure. So the second novel problem, try not to hurry that demand to do the second album. You know, um, decide what's going to feed you as an artist as well as what's going to produce another book. And don't take too big a bite. Don't think I have to outdo the first one. Um, stay reasonable. Something that you think you can finish in 3 or 4 years. Um, So, well, welcome and thank you for joining me for Writing Wednesday. I hope I've given the second novelists hope for their work and, you know, do something fresh, do something with the different, with your different tools, something that you're going to be interested in and something that you are connected to as a person rather than some idea. I think that's the biggest advice I can give you. Uh, Thank you, Amy. All right. So have a good week, and I wish you good writing. Okay, bye. Excellent.